I would now like to introduce to the floor the ANMF, the Australian Nursing Midwifery Federation Federal Office Secretary, Annie Butler. Annie is the Federal Secretary of the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation, the federal union, to which we are, of course, the Queensland branch. Annie is a registered nurse with more than a decade's experience in the industry. She spent a further decade at the New South Wales Nurses and Midwives Association as a professional officer, organiser and lead organiser. And it's with great pleasure that I now hand over to Annie to present the report. And Sally. We have Sally there. Hi, Sally. Sally, of course, Sally Ann Jones, our own Sally. Sally is the president of the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation. And it's a double pleasure to also introduce Sally, who really is it requires no introduction to the Queensland Nursing and Midwifery Union. Welcome to you both. Thank you.
Good morning. How are you? Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having us. I was getting quite alarmed when the most special guest of all, Sally Jones, the ANMF's federal president, was almost left out of the introduction. Now, Sally, I'm going to hand over to you straight away, and we're going to try and share this screen.
Let us know how it's going. So while Annie does that, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Simon. And it is a pleasure to be able to do the round of branch conferences with Annie this year, as we don't have a Federal Assistant Secretary. And as, excuse me, you now have a most fabulous new leadership team, and Simon being your president and chair today, I'm able to do the other parts of the responsibilities of some of my union work. Happy Aged Care Workers Day, everybody. And I hope you have a great conference for yesterday, today and tomorrow. It is my pleasure to acknowledge the owners of the land that we are meeting you on today, which is the Gadigal people. And of course, I extend that acknowledgement in respect of the country that you're all meeting us from on Queensland around and in your various places, because I noticed that you're all online and your branches will be all over Queensland. We extend that acknowledgement and respect to all the traditional owners and the elders past and present, and also all of those First Nations nurses, midwives and care workers who are joining us today. Change and renewal is good, of course. No, it's wrong. I'm going to change the slide. The ANMF Federal Leadership Team has seen some change in the last 12 months since we met with you. And change and renewal is great, but it's also really sad. So we bid farewell to Lorianne Sharp, the Federal Assistant Secretary, who's moved on to be the CEO of Nurse and Midwife Health Australia. You will all be familiar with that organisation. And we also bid farewell to James Lloyd, who was the Vice President and worked with me through some really challenging times in my personal life and helped me do a lot of the ANMF work and lift there. But we welcome Astrid Tiefels as the Federal Vice President now, and she's also from the Tasmanian branch. We don't have an Assistant Secretary right now, so not yet. We're working on that, so I'm leaning in to help Annie as much as I possibly can. Let's have a little bit of a talk about our membership. This graph only shows membership from the Federal Council. Oh, the Federal Council changes. Thank you. I'm moving ahead in my slides. The council is, as you see here, there's been a lot of change actually around the council table in the last 12 months. And as we have farewelled a few members of the Federal Council and welcome some new ones as well. That continues to change as elections are upcoming in the next 12 months or so. So the new council is meeting with quite a lot of new members for the first time at the end of this month. And we're going to make some changes in the way that the Federation moves forward in the years ahead. So we're looking forward to welcoming all those new people with some fresh energy. Next slide, thanks, Annie. We do bid farewell to some very long-standing members, though. You may not know Matthew, who's the ACT secretary for quite a while, but you will all definitely know Lisa and Paul, who are the secretary of the Victorian branch and also one of the assistant secretaries of the Vic branch. Lisa and Paul worked really closely with Albeth and also with Brett from New South Wales. And they're foundational members for some of the big changes that were made to the ANMF and also to the local branches as well, including being the pioneers in ratio implementation and a bunch of things. So we wish them well in all of their retirements and their futures, and thank them so much for the things that they have done for the Nurses and Midwives Union nationally, but also in their own states and influencing ours as well. Thank you. The ANMF membership, here we go. So while the graph only shows membership from 1991, the ANMF is, as I'm sure you know, 100 years old, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. We celebrated our 100th anniversary in October of last year, which marks 100 years since the first formal meeting of the Federal Council, and all branches were attending at that time. The national membership at that time was only 748 members. And here we go. Our current membership has now increased to 345,343. So that's incredible. And I know that we've seen quite a lot of growth in Queensland and the other branches as well to contribute towards that. Okay, so we might move on to the next slide now. And I know some of you will have seen all of this. This is about the 100-year anniversary. We had a lovely cake at our council branch executive meeting a while ago, and you'll recognise some of the former secretaries up in the top corner there. But if we move to the next little one, I know you will have seen this, but we just indulge us to reflect for those people who didn't get a chance to see this tiny little video. We are 100 years strong. It's the most powerful and uplifting few seconds that you'll ever spend, so please enjoy. I hope you enjoyed all of that. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's quite uplifting. And there's a slightly longer one with some videos. I think they're still available on our website. So pop on there and have a little look. Before I hand over to Annie, I just wanted to introduce her to the new executive team of the QNMU. So Simon, who is the new president, introduced us. We also have Lucinda returning as the vice president. So it's good to see you, Luce. And Sarah and Grant and our new assistant secretary, Friday. We welcome you and introduce you to Annie, and I hope you're enjoying your first conference together as a new team. We also have acknowledging that there's been some changes to the federal rules to allow some other members of some councils, not just for Queensland, but also one of the other branches, to allow some designated First Nations officers, and we welcome you all in your council roles as well. So I'll hand over to Annie now, who's going to give us an update on some of the things happening politically at the national level.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sally. And once again, good morning to everybody, and to Simon, Lucinda, Sarah, Grant and Friday. And of course, thank you so much again for the invitation. It's always so great to be able to come to the conferences and talk about what's happening federally, but also we'll get to it in a minute, what's happening around the branches as well. So we just saw a little quick snapshot of all the things that the ANMF has achieved over the last 100 years, and now we're sort of rocketed here to the present. Actually, the slide that you're looking at now is what happened over the last 3 years. So you would know that prior to the Albanese government getting elected in 2022, and we would have talked about this before, we got some commitments from that government to start making some changes, particularly in aged care. But as we came into the second, well, now we know it's the second term, but we were coming to the election in earlier this year in May. We identified that there were 17 gains, specifically for nurses, midwives and care workers, that had happened over the last 3 years under the Albanese government. Some of those were actually implemented or put in legislation and in the pathway to implementation, and some of them have subsequently come in. For example, on the 1st of July this year, well, with the government getting re-elected on the 1st of July this year, I might see if we can, they'd made a commitment to prac payments, but also on the 1st of July, the minimum wage increased by 3.5%. The super guarantee went to 12%. We got the prac payments come in to start to be able to operate. We also had super being, for the first time, start to be paid on the government's paid parental leave scheme. So there are a number of things that happened once that government got re-elected. But what we had, just a couple of highlights from the previous 3 years, was nurse practitioners and endorsed midwives, who might be, some of you might be there today, would know that we removed collaborative arrangements, the need for collaborative arrangements, which were in name only collaborative, but had actually just become an administrative burden and tie, where nurse practitioners and endorsed midwives always had to seek the approval effectively of a medical doctor, which was not good for the community, not good for people in their care, not good for nurse practitioners, and effectively not good for costs either, just duplication all through the system. That's been removed. The prac payments have come in, fee-free TAFE. I know Queensland's had fee-free TAFE for a while, but not every state and territory, and so that now has become available, particularly for enrolled nursing across the country. Improving aged care. Look, we have a lot of work to do, and we know that there are many implementation problems. I'll touch upon a couple of them in a minute, but some of the commitments that were made in legislation to RN 24/7, to mandated care minutes, to starting to improve accountability and transparency, but also very significantly the wage increases to the award wages across aged care. Also, the closing loopholes, we've put that little box there. That means the amendments that were made to the Fair Work Act, which did a lot of things like the closing loopholes. You might have heard about the words of same job, same pay. That was particularly important for industries like mining. For airlines, I don't know if people knew, when you get on a Qantas plane, everyone's in the same uniform. They are all doing the same job, not being paid the same wage, because of the widespread use of labour hire companies to undercut wages in the same workplace, doing exactly the same job. So those amendments to the Act removed that, and now everyone in the same uniform doing the same job in an aeroplane has to be paid the same wage. That's just an example. Improvements to delegates' rights, the right to disconnect, and flexible work arrangements. A number of really significant amendments were made to the key piece of legislation underpinning industrial relations across the country, which is a great step. A lot of how those improvements play out in practice, we still haven't had enough time to really see the benefit and get them fully working, but that's a job we're continuing. And then Sally did mention that we've got the Nurse Midwife Health Program Australia, which the Albanese government funded. The ANMF got that started. It is now fully independent with Lorianne as the CEO. And what we now see, it's got a couple more years funding, but what the next step for that is to get that program funded forever. So that's a bit of a challenge ahead, but we aim to get that done. So now with we know that in May Labor did get back in. We have a second term of the Albanese government, and I think many people would know that what happened at that election was that Labor was returned with really an unequal majority, or at least one for a very, very long time. They have a 51-seat majority in the House of Representatives, which is extraordinary, which means that they hold 94 seats in the House of Representatives. And some of you may have seen that a lot of visuals of the first sitting week, which was just a couple of weeks ago, of the 48th Parliament of Australia were shown on TV because there wasn't actually enough room for all the Labor, new Labor MPs to fit. They were spilling across onto the crossbenches. So they had a very up mood. They're feeling very positive. So our job now is to capitalise on what we have ahead. Because now that while I have just outlined that we had some really important gains and gains that will make, they make structural differences. Now we hope that this government will be bold enough to really embed really important reform, to make health reform really what we need it to be, and to make aged care reform what it's meant to be. So we know we have the words in laws that we now have, and we're going to have the entirely new Aged Care Act coming into effect on the 1st of November. But I suspect the number of you who might be out there working in aged care might not be feeling the differences that we really need to feel. And that's because the sector, some portions of the sector are still trying to resist those reforms. So we've got a lot of work to do in making sure the implementation is effective and as it's intended to be. So I just thought we'd introduce you to the new ministerial team that we'll be working with nationally, that comes under the now expanded portfolio for Mark Butler of health, disability, National Disability Insurance Scheme and ageing. And so Mark Butler remains the senior minister of this team that you see in front of them. Sam Ray is the brand new aged care minister, and he comes from Victoria. Jenny McAllister is the senator for the NDIS. She comes from New South Wales. Emma McBride was there previously, and she comes from New South Wales as well. Assistant Minister for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention. I mean, you can see what they're ministers for in rural and regional health. And Rebecca White, she comes from Tasmania, and she's taking on the portfolio that Jed Carney previously had, because Jed Carney's moved on to the big Department of Social Services with Tanya Plibersek, and Jed has a specific focus there on prevention of family and domestic violence. And I know that Jed is very excited and enthusiastic to be working in that area and doing, really good work in her new portfolios. Rebecca White was formerly the leader of the opposition in the Tasmanian State Parliament, and so she was the leader of the Labor Party in Tasmania. But she didn't win the election, so she's gone into the federal system. The good thing there is, though, that our Tasmanian branch has a very good relationship with Rebecca. I haven't had a chance to meet with Rebecca yet. We just couldn't coordinate just yet, but I've got a meeting with her coming up in a couple of weeks, because Jed had started some really good work as Assistant Minister for Health and Aged Care, particularly in the area of women's health. There's a $500 million women's health package that was committed to and announced by the government before the election. And with Rebecca, we want to work and make sure that it continues, that package is implemented again as intended, and that good work in that space continues. And we did have a meeting with I say the young Sam Ray. It is his second term of government, his first post as a minister. He is a very good communicator. He's enthusiastic. I do believe he understands the needs of workers. I think he genuinely does understand that. So we've had a few meetings with him already, and we've told him about a number of the things that we know are not happening properly in aged care, the manipulation that's occurring to avoid meeting care minutes targets, care minutes compliance, where some people still are not passing on the funded wage increases. There was some of this information he did not know. And so we are going to be working closely with him and just be increasing our demands on the aged care providers to make sure they commit and implement these reforms properly. So now, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, one thing I'll just briefly touch on, some of you might have been paying attention or seen in the news, there's a lot of talk about productivity. There's the Treasurers Roundtable, the economic growth, the name's changed about 15 times, coming up in a couple of weeks, about setting their economic program for this term and potentially a next term. Now, we are trying to and have inserted ourselves very much in how productivity, this concept of productivity, is talked about in our sectors, health and aged care sectors, because you can't do just this economic formula and say that applies to health and aged care sectors. So I'd just say on that, perhaps watch this space, because we've got a lot of work to do and a lot of work to make sure some of our politicians understand, but all politicians understand that nurses, midwives and care workers and the systems that they work in, they are our greatest asset. And so we have to invest in that asset to get the return. That's how our sectors are productive. Anyway, we'll come back to you on that with more information. So the other thing I didn't touch upon is one of the other things is we've done the aged care work value case, and we're just pursuing the second work value case, which is about the Nurses Award, which we will now be making the Nurses and Midwives Award, and we're pursuing similar wage increases for that award for all nurses and midwives who work outside aged care. We have a conciliation coming up in a couple of weeks where we'll see where we land. We're hoping that we might be seeing, cross fingers, because it's always a bit of a battle, but we're hoping that we might see wage increases coming in by as early as December this year. Anyway, so now moving on around the branches, there's quite a lot of activity happening around the branches. The ACT, that's the ACT branch, they are continuing to pursue and improve nurse-to-patient ratios and midwife-to-patient ratio. Well, it's not exactly how it works, as you know, but safe staffing across the board in their territory. New South Wales, you probably see a lot of information. They are still in a protracted dispute with their government, as Queenslanders probably understand right this minute. And well done you on all of your action and activity up there, and keep up the good work. Yes, they're still chasing while they got a commitment to nurse-to-patient ratios from this government, they are still fighting to get their wage increases. And much like you, while they see the police have got their wage increase, other people have got their wage increases, nurses and midwives and care workers are still missing out. Northern Territory, again, most people are focusing on safe staffing and workloads. The Northern Territory had also dedicated a lot of time to environmental action over the last 12 months and trying to prevent fracking and, is it coal seam gas it's called? Yeah. And, highlighting the health impacts of that kind of activity. South Australia, again, pursuing improvements to safe staffing. They've had a commitment for a while now to ratios. They are implementing ratios, but like many people, still have workload issues, EDs overflowing, ambulances ramping, and that We need a whole of system approach to deal with that. We need to fix primary healthcare. It's why the federal health reforms are so important, but also aged care. You know, it's a complex system. Tasmania as well. Some of those signs, I think, indicate what they're talking about, but everybody is on the same page, really. We might be in different states and do things a little differently, but many of the issues are the same. And we know that safe staffing is one of the most critical things to nurses and midwives and care workers across the country. Victoria, you may have seen, they had a very successful enterprise agreement outcome. And so for their public sector, so they are working on getting that matched across other sectors. And they're also continuing to pursue legislated improvements to their Ratios Act at the moment. And WA also secured from their government a commitment to ratios, and so they are now implementing their nurse to patient ratios as well. And you can just see they've got a couple of bags there saying ANF for a long time. That's what they've been called in WA, but they are now, they've discussed with their members, and their branch council has made a decision they will be changing their name to the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation WA branch. So that's terrific development. Now I'm going to hand back to Sally.
And I'm conscious of time. So you may have already seen this particular branding behind us, but you might not have pursued it further than that, though if you've been checking on the ANMF website, you will have seen it. So while all of our activity continues around the country in pursuit of better circumstances for our workplaces, our professions and our communities, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the horrific conditions for so many of our colleagues internationally right now. The ANMF's recent statement on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza explains our thoughts and our position on that particular thing. But the conflict's not just in Gaza, and obviously around the world, things appear to be escalating somewhat. So this couldn't be more timely. Between Iran and Israel, the Ukraine and the Russia war continues, and there's conflicts remaining in Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, and the Sub-Saharan Africa. And through all of it, nurses and midwives and anybody doing care work are trying to do their best for their local communities, and they're in impossible and unacceptable circumstances. I think one of the things that I noted when I went to a recent refugee seminar was that for the very first time in history, hospitals are being purposefully targeted, and that is not usual. That hasn't happened in history in the past. They've been a sacred place of protection for the workers who are there, but also the people within it, and that's no longer the case. So the ANMF Federal Executive is issuing a call for global peace and the protection of humanity. The right to live in peace and access essential humanitarian support like healthcare is a universal right. Yet across the globe, violence, conflict and war continue to devastate communities and destroy critical infrastructure. The Australian Nursing Midwifery Federation stands as a voice for global peace and a call to the end of the violence that threatens our shared humanity. We believe that upholding peace is not optional. It's the foundation of human dignity and health and survival. Without peace, humanitarian needs cannot be met, and without safety, healthcare systems cannot function. And without protection, nurses, midwives, and healthcare workers on the front line cannot deliver life-saving care. It can be really difficult for all of us to know what we can do so far away from that direct conflict, but we know that many members will want to take some action to support their international colleagues and their own communities. The ANMF is starting a campaign in collaboration with the Red Cross for members to take concrete actions to stand with frontline nurses and midwives and healthcare workers to call for immediate ceasefires and lasting peace. The QR code that's on your screen, if you happen to code that, you will be able to show your support, to sign our letter or write your own personal message to nurses and care workers on the front line in Gaza and shortly in other areas as well. You can join the movement online to support our Facebook community and campaign by sharing posts using our peace-themed profile with the dove on it, and adding hashtags like hashtag Nurses Midwives for Peace, hashtag Not a Target, hashtag Human Rights, hashtag Ceasefire Now, to spread the message, and all of that information is on the website through the QR link. You can hear the stories of first-hand accounts from Australian nurses who've recently returned from working in Gaza, and also support humanitarian efforts by volunteering or donating to the Red Cross to help with vital aid. So together we really must speak out and stand in solidarity and demand an end to the violence to ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches all who need it, and that those who provide care are protected and respected. Because as we know, it is through our collective action, which we've demonstrated through 100 years in Australia, that we can achieve our goals for our workplaces, for our professions and our communities. The ANMF members have done a lot in the last 100 years, and who knows what we'll achieve in the next 100 years, because we are 100 years strong and counting. Thanks so much for having us. I'm not sure if there's any time for questions, but we'll hand back to you, Simon.
Thanks so much.